Thomas Gray was the kind of man people read about in magazines. A self-made billionaire, CEO of a global tech empire, and father to a daughter who was the light of his life. 9-year-old Lily was curious, full of joy, always spinning in the halls of his mansion or waiting backstage at his conferences just to wave at him. Her giggles were the only thing that made the cold world of business feel warm. Then came the rainy afternoon. It was supposed to be a quick drive back from ballet class. The roads were slick, traffic was heavy, and one distracted driver ran a red light. The crash was violent. Glass shattered, metal crumpled, and time seemed to stop. When Thomas arrived at the hospital, Lily was unconscious, her tiny frame surrounded by wires and machines. The diagnosis came swiftly: spinal cord trauma. Paralyzed from the waist down. She may never walk again. Thomas, the man who could negotiate billion-dollar deals and build empires overnight, was reduced to silence. His wealth couldn't buy her healing. His power couldn't take away her pain. He spent his days beside her hospital bed, reading books she no longer asked for, brushing her hair as she stared blankly at the ceiling. She didn't cry. Not at first. But her silence said everything. The bright little girl was slipping away, not just physically, but emotionally too. And Thomas, for the first time in his life, didn't know how to fix it. Weeks passed, and Thomas became a ghost in his own life. Board meetings were missed, deals left unsigned. His world had narrowed to hospital corridors and rehabilitation centers. Specialist after specialist gave the same grim nod: Lily's condition was permanent. Every option had been explored. Nothing more could be done. It was on one of those gray, disheartening days that Thomas found himself parked outside yet another clinic, staring blankly through the windshield as rain tapped steadily against the glass. He didn't notice the beat-up pickup truck pulling in beside him, nor the man who stepped out, until a quiet knock came on his window. "Mr. Gray?" the man asked gently. He looked out of place: rough denim jeans, worn boots, a flannel shirt soaked by the rain. He carried no clipboard, wore no stethoscope. "I heard about your daughter," he said, voice low but certain. "Name's Jake. I'm no doctor, but I helped my son walk again after an accident like hers. I thought maybe I could help her too." Thomas stared at him, suspicion flaring. "Are you serious? Do you have any credentials? Medical training?" Jake just smiled softly. "No. Just experience. And patience." Thomas almost walked away. But something about the man's calm, the way he didn't push, didn't beg, just stood there in the rain, hands in his pockets, waiting, made him pause. In a voice tired and desperate, Thomas finally asked, "What exactly are you offering?" Jake replied simply, "A different kind of hope." Jake didn't show up with machines or charts. Instead, he arrived at Thomas's home early the next morning with a rolled-up mat, a backpack, and a quiet smile. Lily sat by the window in her wheelchair, barely acknowledging him. She hadn't spoken to anyone in days. Jake knelt down, not to examine her, but to speak to her, not as a patient, but as a person. "Hey, Lily," he said gently, "I brought some games, if you're up for it." She didn't answer, but he started anyway. In the backyard, Jake set up simple challenges: small beanbags to toss, a low balance beam padded with cushions, a swing with extra support. He called it their fun zone, not therapy. And slowly, almost invisibly, something began to shift. Day by day, Jake built trust. He never forced Lily, never pressured her. Instead, he let her rediscover control. He cheered when she lifted her toes. Clapped when she sat up without help. He told stories of his own son, who had cried, struggled, and failed, until he didn't. Thomas watched from the patio, stunned. For weeks, specialists had tried to fix Lily. But Jake was doing something different. He was giving her permission to believe again. Lily began to smile. Then laugh. And one afternoon, as the sun filtered through the trees, she whispered her first words in weeks, "Can we try the swing again?" Jake grinned. "That's what I was hoping you'd say." The house was quiet that night, but not peaceful. Rain tapped steadily against the windows, matching the mood inside. Thomas sat outside Lily's room, exhausted. The sounds coming from behind the door broke his heart, soft sobs, muffled by a pillow, the kind of tears a child cries when no one's watching. She had tried a new challenge that day, standing for a few seconds with support, and had fallen. Not hard, but enough to shake her spirit. Her confidence, so fragile, had cracked again. Jake entered the room without a word, a warm mug of cocoa in his hand. He didn't tell her to stop crying. He didn't offer empty encouragement. He just sat beside her on the floor, leaning back against the wall like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Want to know a secret?" he asked quietly. "My son fell every day for 6 months. Some days he threw things. Cried. Gave up." Lily sniffled but didn't respond. Jake leaned closer. "But one day, he stood for 5 seconds. That's it. 5. And then he smiled for the first time since his accident. That moment mattered more than all the ones before it." He paused, then added gently, "Courage isn't being strong all the time, Lily. It's getting back up, even when it's hard." The rain outside slowed. Lily turned to face him, eyes still wet, but different now. And the next morning, she asked Jake for her leg braces, not with fear, but with determination. The auditorium buzzed with quiet anticipation. Parents filled the rows, phones in hand, ready to capture their children's recital performances. Backstage, the curtain fluttered slightly as little dancers lined up, giggling nervously. But Thomas wasn't laughing. He stood just behind the wings, holding his breath. Then the music began, soft piano notes filling the air. And out she came. Lily. Wearing a lavender dress that shimmered under the lights, her hair tied back with a simple ribbon. But no one noticed the dress. All eyes were on her legs, steady, sure, and moving. One step. Then another. No wheelchair. No walker. Just a quiet, focused grace as she walked to center stage and joined the other children. Thomas's eyes welled instantly. The room faded. He could barely see her through the tears, but he didn't care. The crowd was still, stunned. Then someone clapped. Then another. And soon the entire auditorium stood, the applause rising like a wave. Jake stood in the back, away from the spotlight, arms folded, a proud smile barely touching his lips. After the show, Thomas found him by the door. He gripped his hand, voice trembling. "You didn't just help her walk. You helped her live again." Jake shrugged, eyes kind. "She did the hard part. I just believed in her before she knew how to." Then, without asking for thanks or praise, Jake quietly slipped out the door, disappearing into the evening, the way real heroes often do.